the future they're gonna ask me anything.
Here we go. We live. I said 5, didn't hit to. We are back. Episode 66 of the Lyrical Ones
Eh.
podcast. We just we dived in. The energy's flowing. We good and affluent. How are you doing?
I'm excellent. We got a guest, long time coming, and you know, it's like if you had a scheduled interview with Prince, and then he changed his name, and he wasn't accepting no interviews no more if you called him Prince. It's kind of like that. So I'm excited, because things change and you got to be ready for them. Life comes at you fast. We had this interview on the calendar for a while, and then creatives sometimes they used to say, you know what,
You trying to play me, bro?
I ain't feeling the name no more. I'm gonna switch it up on them. Busta Rhymes said flip mode is the greatest. Said, I understand. How you doing today?
I am. I'm doing good. I will say. I've definitely focused more than ever. Have some definite things that are brewing that I'm getting ready to make some moves on. Got some things that I'm adjusting, and I'm really thankful, appreciative, but focused. Focused. Let me tell you, putting myself first. It's a new practice. I will say it's a much needed change of pace, but it is absolutely necessary. And I'm saying that to myself as much as I'm saying it to everybody that's watching and that will listen. Put yourself first. Understand what that means. It's not selfish. It's not self-centered to take care of yourself and to make sure that you are well so that way you can take on all responsibilities, all challenges, and all barriers and obstacles. Take care of yourself and put yourself first.
Just like
This man out here.
just like the Witcher
Just like the
and
Witcher.
The
What?
Witcher 3 Wild Hunt.
Just like the
Also,
Witcher. The Witcher definitely was able to take care of himself to make it through every obstacle, enemy, and challenge in their pathway. It's
that's
real.
right.
Sermon.
That's
That's
right.
what's up. So you gonna
Affluent,
ask me how I'm doing?
So we
affluent
got
usually affluent
so we
usually
got
is the one. Hold on,
so
let's
we
be
got
clear.
so we got a
Hold
guest.
on.
We got a
Thank
guest.
you. We do got to guess. Affluent, thank you. Because usually how we've been doing this for the past 65 of them, and if somebody come through, what happens? Affluent be like, all right, well,
Well, here we go. We
Hey, yo,
got a
that's
piece.
dope. Let me get that.
Peace. Peace. Feel me? I just want to say, solidarity and peace as we step into this interview right now. We want to lift up our guest, the poet activist,
Poetic.
the artist formerly, the poetic activist.
There we
See,
go. Look at
gathering my thoughts. You know what it is? You know what it is? I needed to get in here a little bit more
yeah, there you
and
go.
get in here.
There you go. Yep. Get it all out.
There you go. I was real tense watching that baseball game, you know. So I gotta get right. We're coming in the playoff into the regular season. We gotta win 9 games
Oh my
to win the
god.
division. So got
for
it.
those that
All
are
right.
only gonna listen to this, Affluent is wearing full on Giants attire. And then in the middle of introducing our guest,
Right.
decides to pull out his personal
There.
deep tissue massager,
I don't think I've
right? And
ever.
starts to then put the focus on his neck. I don't even know how he just came out with a whole on
Where did
Giants
this
cape.
come from? You got a lot of props right
But
now.
he definitely does. He has everything right in front of him. The whole world is in his hands, or
That's
at least at his
crazy.
foot. So yeah. Without further ado, are you gonna continue the introduction? Or are you
All right, we got the poetic activist here, artist formerly known as Porsche Kelly. Hello, how are you this evening? Are you in the town? Are you in the town right now?
I'm in a town next to the town. I am in
Oh,
Alameda, but I'm right through the tunnel. You know what I'm saying? So I'm not that far. I'm not that far from my city. I'm still here.
okay. What brings you to the podcast this evening?
Man, I'm just here to, you know what I'm saying, let the world know who I am. You know what I'm saying? Like lyrical ones. I heard this podcast is fire. So I'm here to just, you know what I'm saying, be part of the lyrical family. That's all.
so I noticed something that Affluent said. He said the artist formerly known as Portia Kelly.
Yeah.
So does that mean you go by a symbol now, or is there a different combination of names that you go by now?
Well, I just recently got married. So
Congratulations.
thank you. Thank you. So yeah, Kelly is no more. Kelly is has been laid to rest. I'm now Porsche Veu. That's me. It's the new me. Still gotta get all my information changed legally, but yeah. So that's me. Porsche Kelly is. We had a good run. You know what I'm saying? It's actually interesting because I was talking about that with a few people. Like, how do you feel about like having a different name? And I was like, honestly, like we had a good run, and now I'm like, I feel like who I am now is like a new person in a sense. And then they started like making me think a lot. It was like, man, like, but think about your book and all this stuff that you have, and it has your name attached to everything. I'm like, all right, you're getting too far ahead now. Like, let me just sit in this. So it's gonna be a change. Like, even I'll say honestly, like today, I was introducing to myself to somebody, and I had to catch myself because I was like, oh, Portia. I mean, and so it's just like it's getting used to that new identity in a sense.
I hear that. That is what's
That's
up.
that's dope. That's dope.
Congratulations. That is
Thank you.
beautiful.
Thank you.
Congratulations. Would you say it's like washing it clean?
Yo. I just if I would have known that we could bring props, you know what I'm saying? I would have came prepared because
Nah, you great. Don't let him con you into this behavior.
yeah,
Okay?
this is different. This is different.
it's, it's gonna be one of them ones. So with that, so Portia, the poetic activist, right?
Hmm.
How did that come to be? How did you not not only is it being a poet, right, but also being activated to be an active participant, right? What does that mean? How do you come to that combination of words?
Man, so I started doing spoken word like I would say about 6 years ago now. And so I was like, I think for me, like the first thing that I started doing was like social justice. Like I was just focused on that. Like there was just so much going on in the world, but at the same time, like who I am, like I've always been a writer, and so it took me a while for me to actually get my words out to the world. Like I was somebody who would like have so much to say, but there was such a fear in releasing that to the world. So it's kind of like now I'm in this place where like I've had all this stuff to say. Now I can say it all. Now it's like this fear that's subsided, and I can say all the things that I've wanted to say. And so I was like, well, how do I want to present myself to the world? And so I'm one of those people that is very like this is not to be overly confident or anything, but I know that when I walk in a room, like I'm not invisible. You know what I'm saying? Like people are gonna notice. So I was like, okay, I want a name that is gonna stand out. I want a name that is like just me, and I want it to be like I'm the only one, and not in the sense of like no one else can be a poet and an activist, but when you hear you know what I'm saying, the in front of a name, like oh, that's like that's definitive. So I was like, you know what, the poetic activist, and I especially because like I love fighting for people. That's like my heart. I love people, and so for me, it's just like I wanted something that was going to a name that was going to define me and like just make sense with who I am. And I think that once I put myself out there as the poetic activist, like people who knew me, they understood that. They was like, okay, yeah, that fits you, So I was like, I don't want to put a name that just sounds good and it sounds good on paper and it's great stage name or anything like that. But I wanted something that actually fit me and my identity. So
Oh, that's
yeah, the
what's up.
poetic activist was born, yeah, six years ago now. Actually, I would say
6 years
no,
ago.
I would say 5 years ago. 5 years
Okay.
ago.
Okay. 5 years ago. I think the beautiful thing about it, because this is something that I've referenced in previous episodes, is around the idea of tribalism, right? Like,
Mhm.
what does it mean to have a tribe, right? What does it mean to have a community or to have a circle of people that you rely on? And when you broke down, right, what poetic activist is, it calls into that identity of this is who I am. This is the responsibility I hold within my community, right? I could be the leader of the community, right? I could be the doctor of the community. I could be the advocate of the community, or I could be the poetic activist, right? Because the thing is you trace lineage back in time and you think of different levels, different forms of hierarchy, different systems that people engage in. And I always reference the tribal one because it's more circular, right? It's more of us being on the same level. We're within the same area. We take care of each other's children, we take care of each other's families, but we all have a role that we fall into, right? Whether we're the hunter or whether we're taking care of something else, right? We're gathering the food. We all have a responsibility to the to the whole, for the goal, right? For
Yeah.
the whole of our people, or for our culture, or for our movement. So when you say poetic activist, I see you taking on that role of being like a chief, right? Of being this priestess of like, I'm going to represent for my people, and I'm going to do it by channeling my energies through these two words that now have become, oftentimes it's like, oh, what do you do? Oh, I work in sales, I work in finance, I'm a social worker, right? But those are almost like you have to go and jump into the cup, right?
Mhm.
The cup is already there. You just jump in, right? Whereas with you, it was like, nah, I'm making this mine.
Yeah.
This cup, you can't go get a degree for this. You can't. Somebody can't give you
Right.
this. You got
Right.
to go and make it. You got to earn it. And so when you say poetic activist, right? Yeah, the poetic activist, it does carry a certain gravity, a certain level of weight, right? As Affluent was, showing up with the mask, looking like he was a Greek king back in old times, right? It does call on that sense of majesty, right? The majesticness,
Oh, yeah,
right?
for
Of
sure.
saying, it's not often you hear people be like, I am, this is what I am, right? Like I could say I'm a rapper, but again, that's almost me jumping into another cup. That's not me saying taking the forms of how I show up in the world and then announcing
Right.
my title, right? Because you said when I walk into a room, I'm not invisible,
Yeah.
right? So now you can address me not just by my name, but also the title that I carry, right? This is what I've created as my form of being a part of this,
Right.
whether it's the world, whether it's the city, but more importantly, right? Going back to the idea of being a poetic activist, where did you start that? Where you come from, right? Like what was well, as you discovered I'm a poetic activist, where were you in the world?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the first time I ever did a spoken word poem in front of anybody was in 2015. My church, we had an internship, and so for our final like presentation, basically we had to, or like graduation in a sense, we had to like include some kind of creative expression in our final presentation. So I was like, okay, what am I gonna do? And I'm like, I'm a writer. I know I'm a writer. And people knew that I was a writer, but like as a poet, as a like standing on a stage, you know what I'm saying, get up on my soapbox type of thing, that wasn't known about me yet. And so I was like, you know what? I'm gonna step out and do it. I'm gonna just do it. And so I did this poem. And I started off by doing Marion Williamson's poem. How's it go? Oh my god. The my god, like the inadequate, you know what I'm talking about, the Coach Carter poem. The Coach Carter poem.
Greatest fear.
But
There it is, our greatest fear. That's what I'm talking about. I need that help. Yeah, so I started off by doing that. And I think for me, honestly, like it was kind of like one, the first the first step in fighting the fear that I had was share my own words. Cause I was like, okay, I'm gonna just do somebody else's poem. Cause that was my original idea. I was like, I'll recite a poem. And then like I literally felt God was like, you don't need to recite somebody else's poem, like you have your own words, you know. So it's just like, okay, so that was like the first step where it was like, all right, I'm gonna start off by just like starting with somebody else's poem, but it's gonna go into my own. And I think from there it was really like a realization where it's like I don't have to ride the coattails anybody else's stuff. I can do my own stuff, you know. And so from there, I did that piece, and I started thinking about just like, what do I want to do when it comes to poetry? I'm like, I don't want to be in the vein of just like roses are red, violets are blue. Like, no offense to anybody that writes that, that's great. But like for me, I'm like, I want my words to mean something. I want them to come from here. And so I started to think about who I am and what I'm passionate about, like what gets me fired up. And I know that what gets me fired up is justice. Like if you ask any of my friends, like I'm somebody like I don't like people getting away with stuff. Like we go to a restaurant and somebody is rude, like I'm getting everybody's meal comps, like that's me. And so I'm just like, I'm about justice. I was like, okay, that to me spoke to activism. You know what I'm saying? I started to think about people who I admire, Asada Shakur, even though like, she's a wanted fugitive and things like that. But it's like, I see deeper than that. I see the heart behind, what I'm saying, the fight. And so for me, I'm like, you know what? I want to be someone that is known as a fighter, like a freedom fighter, And so that is where like the activism part came in. And then I just coupled that with being poetic, especially growing up in Oakland. I've been grateful to be blessed with a 2-parent household. My parents were very strict because they saw a lot growing up. But that didn't shield me from seeing other people go through stuff. You know what I'm saying? So for me to sit back and see the disenfranchisement and just the lack of care and love and support for people in my own community, I'm like, I can't sit back and be silent about that. Like that's just not me. I've never been that, you know what I'm saying, just innocent bystander. I'm like, oh man, that really sucked that happened to you. I'm like, no, I have to step in. I got to do something. So that's where that poetic activism from me came out of, where it was like, do I want my story to be one where I was the character who sat back and watched things happen, or I was in the action? I was like at the front lines of the fight, and that's me. I'm like, you see a fight happening. I remember my mom tells me all the time, she's like, I came to pick you up from school one day, and there was this fight happening, and I'm walking up and I'm looking for you, and I see you running towards the fight. You're not running away, you're running towards the fight. And she's like, ever since then I knew like you was gonna be somebody that just could not sit back and just stand on the sidelines or butt out. Like I had to be in it. And it wasn't to be mischievous or anything, but it was like, I need to see what's going on. Does anybody need help? Like I need to make sure it's a fair fight. So it's like I have to involve myself, because like I just can't sit back and watch anything go down that shouldn't go down. You know what I'm saying? So yeah.
That's what's up. Because I for surely was running to the fight to just watch and be like, ooh,
Right.
what's going on over here? Ooh, right. And so, it does call on the level of intention, right?
Yeah,
like,
for sure.
what's your intention in this situation, right? It's like, oh, I see what's going down. And my thought process is, do I need to get in the middle of this? Is this like, are y'all throwing ones one on one? Like, what's going down, right? Because the level of care is there to know, like, even in a conflict, there's a sense of like balance, right? To know that, okay, if y'all working out y'all conflict, I come from a place where I've been instilled with values that's going to show up despite whatever the circumstances are. So if y'all gonna fight, what we not gonna do is we not gonna have this turn into somebody getting beat down, where they don't have a chance to walk away or come out of it, right? I'm gonna show up. I'm gonna be there. My presence gonna be felt.
For sure.
And so when you say that the community and the church, what city are you talking about?
Oh, I'm talking about Oakland.
Oakland.
Born and raised Oakland.
The town.
That's my city, the town. You feel me? You know what I'm saying?
So
I know
born and raised from the town?
Say it again?
Born and raised from the town?
Yeah. I moved around the Bay Area a lot, but yeah, all my family's here. Everybody's here. So yeah.
Okay. Okay.
That's right.
I mean, it's I've always given my praise and affinity for the town Oakland. For those listening abroad, again, the practice, the norm of the culture and what we say. The city, when I say the city, I'm referring to San Francisco. When I say the town, the only town is Oakland.
Straight up.
And my appreciation extends to the history and legacy and heritage of what Oakland represents, especially within the Black community, and what that means for the Black identity in America, right? And we often reference the Black Panthers and what that means, but it also goes into the Black business owners, right? The Black artists, the cultivation of the Black community that still exists and is very strong, unlike other areas in the Bay Area. Not to say that it isn't strong in the sense of the strength being determined by the connection or by what the people can do. I'm saying in the number, right? The sheer number of people that are still there, that still occupy space, that still have and maintain their businesses or their legacies or their heritage. It is very different in Oakland. It's not the same because it's historic on many levels. It goes back many decades. But on the other end of it, there's a lot of presence in this current moment that we are in right now of how it still exists. And that's the biggest difference, especially in the Bay. A lot of times in the Bay, there's communities, but when you trace lineage and heritage and history and legacy, oftentimes you're going to find roots that come back to Oakland. Somehow, some way, there's going to be some tie. So, with all that being said, what does the town mean to you?
Man, you know, it's funny because like I was just talking about this recently about like Oakland being for so long being in the shadow of San Francisco, you know, and there's no shade San Francisco at all. But it's to speak truth in my own experience where like I'll go somewhere, I'll travel somewhere and people, oh, you know, where are you from? Whatever. And my initial response was always like, oh, I'm from Oakland, like automatic. They're like, oh, you know, and they're like, they don't know what that is. And I'm like, California, San Francisco. Oh, okay, San Francisco. And you know what I'm saying? And then from there, I found myself, and I had to change that, but I found myself from then on, anytime I would go somewhere and people would ask, I would first say the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area. And then I would say specifically Oakland. Um, and recently, in recent years, I was like, you know what? I don't even want to do that because I felt like, I don't know, I kind of felt like I was in a sense betraying my city. You know what I'm saying? Where it's like, you know, I'll just go along with what people know. I'll just go along with, you know what I'm saying? Like what people understand versus teaching them, you know? And so like now it's like, you ask me where I'm from, if I'm overseas, if I'm anywhere, I'm just like, oh, Oakland. And I'll tell you, it's by San Francisco. It's in this vicinity. You know what I'm saying? So for me, it's like, I think of Oakland kind of like that underdog where it's like, there's so much there, but it's constantly being overshadowed by something else. Like that's the and for me, it's like I go so hard for Oakland because I'm like, yo, there's so much here. You know what I'm saying? Like when we talk about like legacy and legends, talk about activism. I mean, clearly Black Panthers. We talk about the arts and culture and all that. There's so much here that's been overshadowed. So for me, it's like, you know, I feel like most people from Oakland, like we go hella hard. Like it's not just like, oh yeah, I'm from Oakland. It's like, no, like I'm from Oakland, like you're gonna know about it. Um and so like it what Oakland means to me is just kind of like that raw, uncut diamond. You know what I'm saying? Like diamond in the rough where it's like there's beauty if you look at it long enough, you know, and like I think back to I wrote this article a couple of years ago and they was asking like, oh, you know, like write about what Oakland means to you. And I remember just writing about this story about this friend I had who's no longer my friend. But we were gonna hang out, and I was like, "Oh, you know, I'm in Oakland. Meet me in Oakland." She's like, "Oh, I don't go there." And I was like, "What? Like, what are you talking about?" So, I mean, like I've heard on the news, like Oakland, like you know, it's kind of like, you know, I think someone called it like baby Baghdad or something like that. And I'm like, "Yo, what? Like, literally, it's not that deep, you know." But it's like when people who aren't from here I've said Oakland, like, ooh, Oakland. And it's like it has this reputation where it's just like it's just danger or there's nothing good that comes from there. And I'm like, that's such a lie, you know? So for me, it's like there's so much here and I want that to be known. And especially in like recent years, you know, I mean, we can get into gentrification and all that type of stuff. There's so much that's just trying to hold and suppress who this city is. But I go hard for it because I'm like, there's so much here, and not only is there so much here, there's so much in the world that wouldn't be there if it wasn't for, you know what I'm saying, what came out of Oakland. So yeah, it's the diamond in the rough, you know, that's my city.
No, definitely. Because as you were saying that, like not just the diamond in the rough, but also going hard. It invoked the memory of not only of it being one of a kind, pun intended, and shout out to the singer One OAK from Oakland, but also the fact that I did an event a long time ago, and it was for artists, musicians, you know, rappers in the Bay. And when I tell you, Oakland came through, like we promoted it equally in San Francisco and in Oakland. We were trying to get around 200, 300 guests.
Wow.
Of the 200, 300 guests we had, just about 90% came from Oakland, right? And we talking about before we said it, we were like, oh, you know, I don't, they like this is literally the divide because you kind of highlight a little bit between that. San Francisco maintains this mystique in people's mind because of how it's been promoted and
Yep.
broadcasted to the world. And then the opposite is happening in Oakland, right? Where you could look at a Dave Chappelle joke and he's talking about Oakland being this, you know, scary place, right? And the thing is, it's the furthest thing from the truth, because when you get to actually go into Oakland, you find out that, like, I never forget this. I never forget. This was around the same time I seen a black person walking around reading a book, right? And the way they were dressed and the way they carried themselves, I'm like, this juxtaposition, you wouldn't see this in the city. You wouldn't. I'm not gonna lie. I'm not gonna front. I'm not gonna sugarcoat nothing. I'm like, I remember I came from MacArthur Park. I was walking down the street, and I remember this dude with dreads, and I'm like, Oakland built different. And it only got further proven when we did the event and Oakland came through. And I remember all the concerns they had. And I was like, look, this is where you go, this is where you get off, and this is where you end up. And they came through in droves, and they were competitive in the most beautiful way, right? Because they knew that it was a competition, but they also knew, like, they've worked hard and they've refined all the skills necessary to be in this competition. And there was no hesitation, there was no fear. It did not matter the level of quality that you could see. The level of effort was far beyond anyone's comprehension, because it was like, y'all can't, like, Oakland came through and shut it down. And I looked at my city, I'm like, man,
what y'all doing?
what we doing, right? What's going on, right? Because Oakland's coming in and they tearing it up. And so it like immediately grew this sense of respect and admiration for what Oakland is on just a peer-to-peer level, right? Because I remember going to the studios and being brought in to this environment and this vibe and this energy that just, it was so welcoming, right? It's like it was embraceful, right? And it's not to say that Oakland doesn't have its parts and pieces, because San Francisco does too, right? There's its parts and pieces where, you know, if you're not coming with the right intention into a space, you're not allowed in the space, right? And Oakland can be the same way. But if you are around people who are willing to see you and willing to greet you, the embrace and the environment and the vibe is just unlike any other, right? And so, yeah, I can definitely see, by you being a poetic activist, that you carry not just the title and the meaning and the depth of what it is, but also all that kind of cultural energy that comes from Oakland, right? Because, like, the Black Panthers, one, it blew my mind when watching the movie Black Panther that Oakland was featured. Like, when I first seen that, I was like, this what I'm talking about. I ain't even from the town, but I could
No,
I could
for real.
appreciate that it wasn't lost, right? Like, Ryan Coogler being from Richmond, being from the East Bay, it was not lost in translation that we're gonna do a movie called Black Panther. And if we don't have Oakland represented in some way, to the degree that one of the most compelling characters in all of Marvel cinematic display and efforts, to me, Killmonger was like an extension of Oakland, right? It was like when he said auntie, I was like,
that line
this is
for
how,
everybody.
this is what you got to do, right? Like, if you're gonna pay homage, pay respect, and highlight a culture, a legacy, and a people, what better pedestal or what better stage, right, than a Disney Marvel film showcasing and encompassing the complexities of pain, anguish, and just the history of what Black people have gone through, not just as a country, but this town that people just always try to paint this picture of, to then have the movie end and where else but Oakland. So, all that being said, Oakland, what was it like growing up in Oakland for you?
You know, I loved it. You know, I feel like it was so much like, I think for me, like, I felt family with people who weren't family. Like, I think that's one of the biggest things that I always look back at. You know what I'm saying? Like, you kind of make an auntie out of everybody, you know what I'm saying? And not just everybody, but like, especially people put their, if you are a young kid and somebody older sees you kind of like in trouble or anything like that, like they gonna like, yo, what's up, what's good? You know, even just growing up, like, my mom, like, she would always talk about all the time where it's just like, you know, you would know people who were in trouble themselves, like they weren't necessarily living right, but if they knew that you were, like, they wouldn't allow you to be just out here doing anything, you know what I'm saying? Where it's like, yo, we know you the smart one, you gonna make it. You know what I'm saying? Like, you're not about to be out here wilding type of thing. And I appreciate that, where it's like, looking out for one another. You know what I'm saying? It's not about blood. It's not about, we're actual relatives or anything like that. But it's like, I see you, you know what I'm saying, another black person, you know what I'm saying, I got your back type of thing. I love just like the music, obviously. Like it's so funny to me now, like listening to music that we listened to when we was younger. I'm like, bro, we really used to just be like going in and just like, it's just so reminiscent. It takes me back to where it was just like it was just like fun. You know what I'm saying? Like I remember having fun with the fact that there were songs and certain culture that was tied to Oakland, where it's like, if you're not from here, you're not gonna get it. And that's with any place, but like specifically, like I just love that. Like I feel like Oakland is different. Like you just don't get that. And I remember like we went on in my adult age, we went on a cruise a couple of years ago. And mind you, it's probably maybe 5 other black people on this cruise, aside from my friends that went. And I remember we went to like the little club music area. And we was cool with the DJ, so he knew we was from the Bay. So he was like, all right, I'm gonna play some music for y'all. So he played like Blow the Whistle and some other, like, you know what I'm saying, classics that it's like you would know this, but no one knew. And we just did not care. You just see us out there just like going in, and everybody else literally just standing on the side just watching us. And like that was such a moment for me, because it was just like, bro, like I grew up in a place where everybody's not going to understand us, and that's fine. Like Oakland people know what's good. Even Bay people know what's good, but specifically Oakland, it's like when that Oakland song drops, it's like that's it. You know what I'm saying? Like everything shuts down. It's just kind of like I don't know if you guys watched Blind Spotting, the TV series. So there was an episode, I think it was like the second episode, where the main character, I forget her name, they was all outside and they started having like a sideshow. They was going in, you know what I'm saying, Mac Dre playing, and she just had this moment where it was just like slow-mo, and she's watching everything. It's like, seeing people just out having fun, seeing people doing sideshows, and just like it was just like a moment where it's like, dang, this is my city. That's how I feel looking back, where it's like, this is where I'm from. Like despite what anybody says, like I'm proud to be from here. Despite even the things that, like you said, like it doesn't mean that where we're from is perfect. There could be a lot that, you know what I'm saying, needs to progress, but that doesn't mean that, I'm ashamed. You know what I'm saying? Like I still take pride in where I'm from. So yeah, like I love this place. Like I love it. And I'm just so in a space where I'm like, look, you may not understand, but this is where I come from. And you know what I'm saying? Like I'm gonna make you understand.
You're gonna understand today.
Right.
You're gonna learn today.
I
mean, no, it's amazing to hear that, because it is a thing where, that sense of like what your experience was, right? You go into a cruise ship and you're able to channel that energy, and you don't even know the impact that you might have on the people around you, where now because of this song, they're gonna think of you, right? Because
Right.
Blow the Whistle became so popular with the Warriors, right? That at some point it's gonna transverse the borders and the line. I mean, even what Jay-Z had his own version of it, right?
Oh man.
And it's like you realize, right, which was to you is like second nature, right?
Right.
But then to the world, it becomes, wait, what is that? Right? What is that?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And here
Yeah.
you are in the middle of the ocean, gigging and wilding and doing your thing, but the impression and the impact that you're gonna have is gonna last, right? You don't know what someone saw and was like, takes it, because to me, even that the description of Blind Spotting, it reminds me when I watched the movie, because I haven't seen the show. But there's that scene, I think, when they're outside of like the burger spot or whatever,
Oh
and
yeah.
the music's playing, and me being skeptical, I always give an air of skepticism, because I'm like, how they gonna represent it, right? How they gonna show
Yeah.
this, right? Because to me, it was what I call the Bay Area trifecta of movies at the time, right?
Yeah.
There was Last Black Man in San Francisco, there was Blind Spotting, and there was what was that with Lakeith Stanfield?
Sorry to bother you.
Sorry to bother you, right?
Yeah.
So these three
Made by
movies, I'm
Rich
coming
Eisen.
with skepticism, and Blind Spotting, I'm like, let me see what's up. But when that scene hit, I'm like, this is representative of something that's familiar to me. This is
Yeah.
representative of something that is more as when you were describing it, right? The sideshow. Because I remember that same day I seen the dude with the book, I walked down the street and I seen a sideshow, and I was like, this place is wild. Like you get the best of both worlds, right? In such a short distance. And
Yeah.
it's not to say it can't happen elsewhere. I'm saying in my limited existence and perspective, and my own ignorance, this is how I was introduced to this, and this is what I saw. And to me, it was beautiful because, yeah, it's this poetry in motion that you see start to take place where people are expressive and they're displaying levels of joy that to the average person, right? Like they'll probably scoff at, right? To
Yep.
what safe society says, this isn't justifiable. But when you've taken as many hits as most people have, or you've gone through as much adversity and the resources aren't accessible, or you don't have the availability and what may be commonplace for everyone else, you'll innovate, right? When you have restrictions or limitations, that's innovation. And the way that Oakland is able to innovate off of those limitations and those restrictions is some of the most grand, pun intended, grand F, those some most grand ways, right, of displays of affection for people and just passion and joy. And so, yeah, I think about that, especially because side shows right now, like it's to me, it is an Oakland thing, but it's also a Bay Area thing. But now it's almost like getting into a global thing because, it's one thing to be, fast racing and doing all that or be a car head, a gear head.
Yeah.
But right now, when it comes to burning rubber and getting like blocking out an intersection, it's like the world can't help themselves but want to show Oakland like that's how I take it. I take it as we finna show them how we get down, right? Whether it's in Detroit or whether it's in New York, I feel like it's so accessible to see like how the town get down. To now everyone's gonna be like, all right, we're gonna do it our way, right? We're gonna
Right.
take our spin on it, right? I mean, we could go on and on about stunner shades and the terminology and the lingo and scraper bikes and all these different things. Shout out to the Trunk Boys. But these different historical moments, right, then ripple across the country, right?
Yeah.
And Oakland, yeah, like I said, it's definitely a huge piece of the Black American narrative, especially when it comes to just you know uh, our sense of Renaissance, right? For the modern era, I think is like it's evident. Like, come on, Ryan Coogler doing all these movies and showcasing like Andre Ward and the
Mhm.
Creed films,
Yep.
and like, come on, you got
Keep
to give it up to
going.
where it's coming from. You got to give
Yeah.
respect. Everybody know what's up.
Right.
So that's incredibly like just profound, but also humbling to know. But
Yeah.
beyond that, when you say family, what is family for you? All right, are you one of many? You as only child, siblings? You said came from a two-parent household. What was that upbringing like?
Yeah. I had a great upbringing. I really did. I mean, my parents were strict. They didn't let me do much, and in my adult age now, I understand why. But like as a kid, like as an actual child, before wanting to be a teenager and doing all the things, I had a great childhood. I am one of three, so I'm the oldest of three. I have two younger brothers. Um, Shout out to Tommy and Jonathan. But it was hard for me because like I was 7 years old by the time my first brother came. So I'm like I'm used to all the attention. I'm used to just like being spoiled. Like I'm the sole, you know what I'm saying, child, and then to have somebody come in, I'm like, nah, bro, you trying to take my spotlight? You trying to take my shine? So me and my oldest younger brother, we actually had like a sibling rivalry for a while. Like we just did not get along, and we laugh about it now. We talk about it now, but it was hard because to be 7 years from your sibling, and then my other brother came after, so that's 7 and 11 years. So there was like I couldn't relate much, and I think for me it was hard because I'm like there's so much out there I want to experience. People have friends. I know people who have siblings, so they get to hang out with someone. I'm like, I can't hang out with my siblings, and like my parents come from big families. Like my mom had four sisters, and my dad had six siblings. So it's just like you guys grew up and they were around your age. So it's like you grew up with siblings who you had multiple and they're around your age, so you had people that you could actually hang out with. I'm like, if I'm 10 years old, I'm not hanging out with my little baby brother. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, what am I going to do? And so that was probably like one of the hardest things for me growing up. It's just like being able to get out and do stuff. But like, you know, we live in a world where so much has happened. And I know that, you know, especially when it comes to the Black community. And I love the fact that, you know, we're talking about mental health a lot more now, and even just things that need to be uncovered. But, you know, so much got swept under the rug when it came to my parents' generation and stuff. You know, it's like we don't talk about certain stuff, you know, we don't do certain things. And my parents was like, well, we're not doing that with our kids, you know. So it's like there was such a level of protection over me that while I was young, and then I'm like, yo, my parents don't let me do anything. They're so strict. I can't stand them. But now in my adult age, I look back and I'm like, you know, I am grateful. I am grateful that I was held back from doing certain things, you know. I do tell them, I'm like, look, I appreciate y'all. Y'all still was a little too strict. You could have loosened the reins a little bit. But overall, like I'm very appreciative of the fact that, you know, there was a protection there. You know what I'm saying? Like I didn't get to experience everything being young. And one of the biggest things they will always say was like, we don't want to let you do everything. And then when you get older, it's like, what else is there to do? You know what I'm saying? It's just like we want you to look forward to stuff. So it's just like once I became an adult and I moved out, I'm like, all right, cool. Like now I get to do this. Now I get to do that. I got nobody tell me what to do. But as a child, like a young child, like I had a great childhood. I had parents who, you know, they were married, and in our family, unfortunately, they were one of the few people that were married. Like everyone else is just kind of scattered about. But yeah, like two-parent household, they were married. They showed up for everything, like everything. My mom was like very heavily in, like when it came to my education, like everything. Like I went to school. People always be like, "Oh, you just want to brag." I'm like, I don't want to brag. I went to school early. I started school when I was like 4 years old, and they did not want to let me in because it was like, she's too immature. Like she's 4, like she needs to be 5 years old to start kindergarten, yada yada. So it was like, all right, we're gonna test her. She has to test in order to get into kindergarten. So my mom always loves to brag about this. She's like, yeah, okay, so they made you take this test, and they didn't know that we would have you at home doing all these like third grade, fourth grade, fifth grade books when you was younger. So you tested at a fourth grade level, and they were just so amazed and all this stuff. I'm like, so I would always run with that anytime like anybody at school had something to say about me. I'm like, yo, check this out. Like, I am hella smart. You know, like I'm a genius. And so like I grew up being that like super intelligent, educated young kid. Like I've been deemed a genius many times, and I really look back and I appreciate that my parents put so much into like my education and me learning a lot, because I feel like I'm very well rounded now, and not just when it comes to like education and academics and things like that, but even like music. Like my parents listen to everything, you know. And so like one of my best friends, is funny because like her mom, you know, we all grew up in church, but her mom is very strict on like, you're not listening to anything that's not Christian music. Like if it ain't gospel, if it ain't Christian, you're not listening to it. I'm like, my parents was, you know, I mean, we was in the church, but like they let me listen to, and not nothing explicit, but they wanted me to be well rounded. So I'm listening to, you know what I'm saying, Aerosmith and Michael Jackson. I'm listening to Prince and Eric Clapton. You know what I'm saying? Like all these different people, you know. And so like I'm so grateful because now I feel like I have so much, and specifically like being Black, I think for me that's important for me, and that's something I definitely want to instill in my kids when they come, because I'm like, I don't want things to just be taught that are supposed to be Black things. You know what I'm saying? It's just like there's such a big world out there. It's like, why do we have to be limited, you know? So like I love the fact that I have such a, if I could say anything about my childhood, it would be that it was fun and I was well rounded.
The takeaways for me in everything you just said. One, intentionality.
Hmm.
Your parents had a level of intention with you to
Yes.
say, with the first one, we gonna try out some things. We just gonna make sure we make this investment
Yep.
early, right?
Exactly.
Because the doubt, the skepticism, the projection of fear in what your limits are, right? They were like, nah, we got this. So when the test comes, you've already taken the test. This
Yep.
isn't even the test. This is practice. This is
Yep.
continuation of everything you've already been doing,
Yep.
right? So just perform in your practice. And then it's changing the narrative of what the Black experience is within, you not only are in Oakland, right? Like I'm saying that because yeah, San Francisco has one of the lowest populations of a Black community when it comes to a metropolitan area, and a large part of it has to do with how San Francisco politics play on or prey on the Black
Mm.
community. Now in Oakland, the activist nature and the fact that the Black Panthers were there and they created all these initiatives and a lot that I still take pride in because the core tenets of the Black Panther Party, right? They had 10 demands, right? That's something that even in this generation sometimes lacks. But your parents was like, we're going to be demanding of you, right? And not in a way where it's you in the teen angst or in the development of being an adolescence, it's like you're restraining me or you're putting constraints on me. But in the reality, it's your parents have experienced and realized there's a world outside that's unforgiving,
Yep.
and that the pain and anguish you have of me holding you back here is nothing compared to whether or not you touch that fire out there. And so, because I feel that I totally understand that because my parents definitely started off on the side of I'm gonna hold you back. I ain't gonna let you do everything you want to do
Right.
because I understand based off of whether it's family history or whether it's societal or whether it's outside experience. There's certain things I don't want you to experience yet,
Yep.
right? But even deeper in that, right, is like we're gonna make sure you're well versed in what music is beyond the scope of what the faces look like. But the kind of cycle that comes back around in that is it's still all Black music, especially if it's American music, because every popular form of American music starts with a Black person, right? And that's one of the most that's something that can oftentimes get lost because you know when you say Aerosmith and you're like, oh, Steven Tyler, who is that? And you see what he looks like, and then you lose sight of the fact that his influences come from Black artists,
Right.
right? Eric Clapton's influences come from Black artists. The identity of rock and roll and jazz and blues and all these different forms of music all take root within the Black experience. And of course we can get into kind of how messed up it can be when someone is able to exploit it in one of the most unfair and just disrespectful ways, because that's what it is at the end of the day.
Yeah. For
But
sure.
at the same time, it doesn't take away from the impact of what this music is and how when you listen to it, it can shape your perspective because you're exposed to it, especially being young.
Right.
So shout out to your parents for knowing
Big
what's up
shout out.
enough to be like, we gonna make a genius, right?
Literally. Yeah.
We gonna make sure that our child is gonna, because I think that was like what you said. That was like, man, that's a good one. I'm gonna have to use that one. Like, if you experience it all now, what you gonna have left when you get older?
No, for real. Like
And that's
literally.
so real, but it's also so cunning because it's like, am I really experiencing everything in the world?
Right.
Right. But
Right.
but that's the thing, right? You say it, it's gonna sit with you to the point that it appears now, and it hits me, and I'm like, guess what my children finna go through?
Right.
Because it's inspiring to know that you were able to, this is something that's been recently brought up within the other me, which is, people who don't come from the culture, right? I've strayed away from being so just about race, right? Because there's white people who can be down for the culture, and there's white people against the culture. So I'm not gonna say they white or they Black, but I'm gonna say they was against the culture. And what they had said was, oh well, they facilitate a class that is giving skills, and the Black participants they said, oh, they always need extra hand holding, and I was like, is it that they need extra hand holding, or is it that you don't make it culturally relevant so that they can understand what you're saying? Because there's a buy-in when it comes to being, when I speak the same dialect as you, the transfer of information is at a higher rate
Right.
because I'm speaking to many different levels on different many planes of communication, right? Because if I don't create a safe space or I don't give you comfort, I don't invoke trust, if I don't hit all these different levels, then your cognitive abilities will be limited. So me as a facilitator, if I'm not making sure that I'm hitting all these points, I'm going to have to lean in a little bit more because you're not able to get the information because I'm not giving you a connection, right? Like it's as simple as Wi-Fi. How many bars you got? Your bar is kind of low. Your signal kind of weak,
Ain't
right?
connecting.
It ain't connecting, right? And so what it is your parents, to me, in my interpretation of what you said, is they knew enough to make sure that your reception, no matter how weak the signal, is going to be off the charts.
Yep.
because I'm going to prepare my child, I'm going to prepare my baby to go into a world that is going to try and devise challenges, boundaries, all of these different systems that it's going to try and prevent them from being a genius. So let me front load every little bit I can. So as 4 years old at a third grade, fourth grade level, which when you really think about it, one of the most abused terms is they decide how many jails they gonna build off of the reading scores of a third grader. If you a 4 year old with a third grade, it's almost like you destroyed a prison.
Mm.
And the thing about me is, we talk about the truth will set you free, but what's more absolute truth than knowledge, right? When you have that ability to have factual base,
Yeah.
where you're able to discern and think critically about what is going on, and you have a head start on this race, right? Where it's like, oh, we gonna train our baby. Our baby gonna be ready to hit the track running. Ain't gonna be no hesitation. Ain't gonna be no nerves because they've been immersed into this. So when they go through it, they can be a genius and continue to be a genius. So that when they do walk into a room, they know that they're not invisible, right? Because
Right.
oftentimes, especially when it comes to the society and the world that we live in, and we see it time and time again, how Black women are treated, it's so important for Black women to know that they are not invisible, that they are seen, and that it starts from within and that they have that. And I think it's a beautiful thing to know that your parents was intentional, so intentional
Absolutely.
to want to say, we're going to make sure our child, when they go in, no matter what the number is on the age, they going to kill the game. Because I'm like, to be at a third, fourth grade reading level, right, to have that ability, right? Oh, too immature. I'm gonna tell you what your daughter is because this is my experience and this is what
Right.
my feelings are. Oh, this is amazing.
Yeah.
Your child tested above our metrics. Yeah, boo boo the fool. Get out the way and let my baby in the classroom.
Period.
Like, people be wilding, and
Hey,
it
man.
doesn't end, right? Because I'm sure you had those instances where people have tried to challenge who you are because of what they see, not because of what they've come to know or what they've come to learn, right?
Right.
How have those experiences been being a poetic activist coming from Oakland and carrying that with you into spaces where you do see a level of unjustness, right? Like, what is, especially in this past recent 2 year span, right, where we've gone through a worldwide reckoning. What does it look like for you when you walk into a space? How do you begin to address, right? What does it look like for you to set the tone of the standard or manifest the change you think needs to happen or you feel or needs to happen?
Yeah. I think for me, I've gotten to a place where I've just started not caring. And what I mean by that is it's like there are too many instances where people are silent about things. Like that's what I realized. And I realize there's a lot attached to that. People can be silent out of fear. I think that's one of the number one things why people don't speak about things. They're fearful. What are people going to think when I say something? Am I saying the right thing? Am I talking out of turn? Do I have all the facts? And then there's, kind of like the, I'm gonna mind my business. I don't need to say anything. I don't want to touch that. And I think for me, I've gotten to a place where when it comes to like spoken word, I don't even like to call it performing anymore, and that's another story. We'll say that for another time. But for me, like if I'm on stage, I'm just like, this is my opportunity to be as real as possible. You know what I'm saying? Like I feel like there's so much fluff about stuff. There's so many gray areas, and I think for me when it comes to certain things, I'm like, some things are black and some things are white. It's either this or it's that, and I'm very direct. I've been in spaces where I've performed. Literally, there was actually a LO event at Joyce Gordon Gallery. I can't remember what the event was, but it was years ago. And I remember I was doing this poem, one of my most known poems called Black Girl, and I wrote this poem. The first time I performed it was at another LO event. See, I'm always connected to LO in some way, like lyrical opposition. Like I'm always doing something. But I remember we had Hope Nights. They did this super dope event series called Hope Nights during the summer. And I shared my poem called Black Girl. And it was about my experience growing up being Black, being a Black woman, and how that has shaped my perspective of myself, how it shaped my perspective of other Black women, other Black people, and just people in general. And just trying to find my place in the world, and coming from a place where I have been so disrespected, I have been overlooked, I have been discounted because of literally just being Black, and then on top of that being a woman. So that was my poem. And the second time I shared that poem, I shared it at this event, and literally in the middle of my poem, it was a group. And my thing is, you're not sitting in the back, so it's not like you can kind of sneak out. It was a group of about 4 to 5 white people, and they were sitting about in the middle row. They stood up and they walked out. And some people could, well, maybe they just had somewhere to go, maybe that's somewhere to be. And I'm like, no. When you are on stage and you are performing, and I'll say performing for this sake, a performer sees people. You see people. Now, there may be some times where you're performing or you're speaking and you just like, you block out everything and it's just you and the mic. But many a time, we as performers or artists, we feel the energy, right, of like the crowd, of like the audience. So like I see the faces, I see the body language, and it's not just, oh, we have to get out, we have to go somewhere, but it's what I'm saying is making you so uncomfortable that you can't even stay there to hear any more of it. And after that, I'm surprised at myself because the old me would have gotten super offended by that. I would have been like, yo, like they literally walked out in the middle of my poem. How rude. And for me, that was like a realization for me where I was like, everybody's not going to like what you have to say. Everybody's not going to be able to receive what you have to say in general, or they may not be able to receive it in that moment. To this day, I don't know if those people ever saw anything else that I've done. But I know that for me, I have to continue doing what I'm called to do and sowing those seeds. So it's like, for me, it's about being bold. It's about being bold. It's about saying things that everybody's not going to say, saying things that people want to say, but they just don't know how. I've learned how to take that and use my art to just be blunt and not to offend people on purpose. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm not just out here to just be offensive. But whenever I do a poetry set, I always start off by saying, if there's anything that I say tonight that offends you, I just want to say ahead of time, I'm not sorry, but you can come talk to me about it after. Because I think for me, it's like we become a culture where we've attached, if you're offended by something, then what was said, it doesn't matter what was said. You were offended. That's all that matters. But for me, it's like, well, why were you offended? Let's talk about that. Let's get to the root of that. Is your offense misplaced? People don't want to talk about it. It's like, if I'm offended, I'm offended. If I was hurt, my feelings were hurt. And it's like, I don't want to dismiss anybody's feelings, but at the same time, sometimes we kind of use that, you know what I'm saying, as an excuse to not understand truth, to not see where people are coming from. People who are not Black, I'm offended by what you're saying. When really it's truth that I'm speaking, it's just really hitting you, you know what I'm saying? And so I've gotten to a place where when it comes to my speaking, when it comes to poetry, when it comes to artistry, it's just truth. Like I can't give fluff because I'm like, there's enough of that. And I feel like I don't want to look back at my life and see the things I put out as, I put things out that coddled and made people comfortable versus making them uncomfortable so that they can see change. Because my thing is, I don't want to just make people uncomfortable for no reason. Like I want to make you uncomfortable so you can learn, so you can grow, so you can understand, so you can see where I'm coming from and get to a place where now you're like, okay, I'm able to see where my mindset has been miscued, or I'm able to see where my perspective was a little off. That's my goal. Like I never want to just leave people with offense, but I'm also not afraid to do that if that's what it takes, you know what I'm saying, for them to get to a place of growth. So like walking in a room and doing my thing, like it's not just about, it's not just about performing or making something sound good. And I want to talk, I just want to say, the last thing I want to say is like, I think that there was a time, and it could be even now, but there was a time where I felt like social justice was popular, like it was popular to talk about social justice issues. It was probably like every poet or every spoken word artist were talking about this, talking about that. And it's like at the heart of it, what is the purpose here? If we're just talking about just to talk about it, you know what I'm saying? I'm not saying like poetry can't be a space where you just express yourself and that's it. Like it should be. It's a great medium to use for so many things. But I'm like, we got to get back to the goal. You know what I'm saying? And art, we talk about poets. Like poets are like the voice of the people. You know what I'm saying? Like we start movements, we help movements move along and all these different things. And so for me, it's like, my art has to mean something. Like when I leave, I don't want my book to just be, oh, it was a great book, it was nice, it was some good poems in there, but no, like it helped somebody change their perspective or their mindset. So I'm all about end goals and really driving home change. That's me.
No, I appreciate that. I appreciate also the fact that you said, if I offend you, I'm not sorry, but we could talk about it.
Yeah.
It's important, so important, especially when it's easy to get, you know, kind of lost in your own choir, or you get lost in your own crew, and you're able to just keep the echo chamber going and living in a vacuum, right? Where someone may introduce a concept, an idea, or a fact that's hard to accept or digest, that a conversation, if a person permits, is a beautiful thing,
Yeah.
right? Because oftentimes that's sometimes what I feel like is lacking, right? Someone believes what I'm saying is absolute, and there's no room for discourse,
Yeah.
especially from the source. And so I think it's incredible that you're able to offer that opportunity for people to discover and go through that depth, to uncover what it is, how this came to be, because it doesn't minimize your truth to have a conversation, right? If anything, it can maximize it, right? Because there's more subtlety and it can be more specific. Because as a creative, I'm saying what I need to say,
All right.
and then how you resonate with it. For them individuals that decided to get up, their cell phone service was just so weak they couldn't receive what you was vibrating into the air, right?
Yeah.
You was giving off that 7G, they was working off that 3G,
7G.
and they just couldn't get it. They just like, yeah, nope, I'm out, right? And sometimes they might need an upgrade. You might need to get your plan changed, but you can't do that if we don't talk about what plans is available to you, right?
Right.
And the thing is you offer that opportunity for a person to opt in for better coverage, to get a part of the network. Because in the end of the day, we're just trying to connect, right?
Right.
I'm just trying to give you this message and hope that you can get this signal that I'm giving. But not everybody can, because not everybody's equipped, right? So sometimes you got to go get the upgrade.
Yeah.
Sometimes you got to invest and have that extra conversation to find out, can I get this on my network? Because my network might have a limited bandwidth. I may have a limited scope. And I think that is so, it's beautiful, but it's important. That if anything, I hope other creatives and other people understand that a conversation can lead to a beautiful thing.
Right.
And I can't highlight that enough. So Alfluent, I know
Yes,
you've been in meditation mode, but I just wanted to pass it to you because I kind of did get in the zone.
that's all good. Portia, would you say that you walking in that identity of the poetic activist was like liberating for you, and then like picking up the fight and knowing where to fight and what to bring attention to? Do you feel like um, that comfort and that commitment and intentionality that you like inherited from your parents, do you feel like that is something that has propelled you even further?
Yeah. Definitely liberating. Like definitely freeing. Like I said, like I've written poetry all my life, but like it took me so long to get to a place where I felt the freedom to share that. And so it's like once I started walking in that, yeah, I felt like a great surge of confidence, and not like cocky or arrogant, but it was just like, yo, like I can do this. Like I'm called to this. It's to come to the realization of what your calling is, like that's a beautiful thing. You know what I'm saying? Because like we're always searching for whether we're verbal about it or not. Like we're all searching for our purpose. Like what's my purpose? What am I supposed to do in life? So like once I got to that place, I was just like this is it. It's like within yourself, like this is what you're supposed to be doing. And it was a great freedom for me because um, it took me from a place of hiding and um being ashamed of who I was. You know what I'm saying? Like I talk about this often, especially with my Black girl poem, where one of the reasons why I held back from sharing my poetry for so long is because I'm like, I'm saying things that people may not want to hear. How's it going to look like coming from a Black woman? You know, we already have the stereotype of being loud and aggressive and this and that. Now here I go. And then, you know, once I started moving in my calling, I'm like, I don't really care. You know, like I don't care if they think that, because I know this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And so that is definitely, I feel like that's one of the biggest places of freedom, where you don't care what people are going to think, or you don't care what is attached to, what may be attached to your calling. You know what I'm saying? So for me, like, that was definitely a liberating experience for me walking into that. As far as everything that my parents instilled in me, yeah, like I am, you know, it's interesting because sometimes I think that I can be a little more closed-minded than not, but I'm also very open-minded because of what my parents instilled in me. And that's something that I want to carry on, you know, as I go through life. You know what I'm saying? Like being in different spaces. One of the biggest things for me is like, you know, I'll end with this because I know we're pressed for time, but church. So like I said, the first time I shared a poem was in church, you know, like that's where I started. But where I'm at now, not to say that I'll never, you know what I'm saying? Not to say that I won't share my poetry or things in church anymore. I definitely will if I'm asked or if I felt led to, but I don't feel like that's not the lane that I'm in. And so the connection for that and me with talking about the open-mindedness is like being someone, like people have asked me, oh, are you a Christian poet? And I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm a poet that's Christian. I'm a poet that is a believer. I'm a poet that loves God, loves Jesus. I don't deem myself to be a Christian poet because I feel like that puts me in a box. I feel like that, not to say that that makes anyone else closed-minded, if that's what you feel like your vein is, but I feel like what I'm called to is bigger than that. And so I don't want to be attached to that because I'm trying to change the narrative of what even a Christian poet is. You know what I'm saying? Like, I can be a Christian poet. I don't have to, every single poem I have doesn't have to have the name Jesus in it. Like, it doesn't. I could be talking about social justice and I'm being a Christian and I'm a poet at the same time and talking about social justice. That's biblical. You know what I'm saying? So for me, it's like the things that my parents instilled in me about being open-minded and all the different like different genres of music that I listen to, different TV shows, different books I've read, all that type of stuff. It helps me now to start to mix things in a way that I can use to glorify God at the end of the day, you know. And it's not like, oh, I'm mixing things and I'm, you know, the lines are getting blurred, like nothing like that. But it's like legit, like certain things don't have to look a certain way. And that's my biggest thing, where it's like I said earlier, you know, oh, you're Black, but you know, you're listening to this kind of music. So what? Like, there's nothing wrong with that. Like that, there's a well-roundedness in that. And I think for me, when it comes to like my poetry, my art, and using that in my activism, I think there's a well-roundedness that I'm trying to bring to that, so that it doesn't look one way. You know what I'm saying? Somebody once told me, and I was like, this is false. Somebody told me, you're going to have to either choose Jesus or choose activism. And I was like, what? That doesn't even make sense. Like, Jesus was activist. What are you talking about?
By choosing activism, I'm choosing Jesus.
Right, literally. But my thing is like, and that just goes back to like, I mean, that was a problem back in that day, where it's like there were things that he did that people didn't understand, but he had to keep doing it. And that's where I'm at, where it's like, I'm gonna do things a different way, the way that I feel led to, and everybody's not gonna be able to understand. And I'm just gonna have to be okay with that. And I think for me, especially with that liberation, you know, the question that you asked me, like being the poetic activist is realizing that. It's realizing that the gift and the what I have to offer is not going to be appealing to everybody. Am I going to continue walking in it? Or am I going to try to shift it and mold? Okay, well, let me fix it a little bit so that it looks a certain way so this person can receive it and this person can receive it. I do want to say, like, there are times where, you know, everybody can't receive something the exact same way. So you do, you know what I'm saying? You can kind of alter it a little bit to feed them to it the way they can receive it. But at the same time, like the heart of it is still there. Like the heart and the true identity of who I am, that's not going to change just because people aren't okay with it. So that's what I have to say about that.
Yeah, and I feel like your experience and your intentionality filters enough of your content to fit in the ear and mind and heart of who's hearing it.
Yeah.
And I think the the term Christian creative is a way to kind of dilute someone's character into a box. It says, right, this will be safe if we put Christian in front of their creativity. If we
Yeah.
do that, then we say then it's accessible and user friendly. And activism, radicalism, freedom is not necessarily user friendly. And as you feel that liberty, I really want to know, kind of what those the emotions and freedom is are like, but also like as you do things that are kind of unsafe for people's uh, comfort levels and unsafe for people's the status quo, it seems like you have become more safe in yourself, safe in your own skin, safe in your own um, destiny, almost safe in your own your title, your identity, uh, finding refuge and stability in who you are as a person, as a creative, as a Christian, to the point where you can say what you need to say, not worry about what anyone else um, says or feel or how they receive it, and also, come home at the end of the day knowing that you walked in your purpose.
Yeah. Yeah. Where I started at in those emotions, like going from like honestly like anxiety, like oh my god, like oh my gosh, like if I say this, am I gonna offend somebody, or what if I say the wrong thing and this and that, to where I am now, where it's like truth is truth, and I don't just speak truth. I'm just like I'm gonna just tell the truth, and if you're hurt by it, haha, like no, like there's love coupled with that as well, but the safety that you're talking about, yeah, I think I've come to a place where I've become more secure in myself, in my identity, um to where it's like, again, like I talked about, like I can have a conversation with people, but I'm the foundation of who I am and what I know to be true is not going to be easily moved because of somebody else's opinion or their thought of me and what I said. um and I think that I've come from that place where like oh, I feel like I have to filter certain things. I remember one of the performances I did for Adobe years ago. I was like, I feel like I should edit this poem. I feel like I should change it up, because I had like some there's a particular part of the poem where I had like a lot of God in there, and I was like, oh, it's corporate, I don't want to do that. And I remember literally talking to the lady. She was like, no, like whatever you need to say it. And I'm like, you know what? Yeah, like what am I, what am I trying to dilute myself for? You know what I'm saying? Like there's no reason for me to do that. And I think we get in those spaces, it's easy because it's like, okay, if there's a certain, space you're sharing in, or a certain audience you're speaking to, you got to cater it to them. And I'm like, I can't do that. There's only so much of that I can do. And so like, yeah, I've gotten to a place where I'm secure and I feel good about it. That's the emotion where I feel contentment, because there's been times where I'm like, I'm gonna just do it. But then after I'm mulling it over and I'm like, oh, like, was this the right decision? Should I have said this? And then I start questioning my own identities, and it doesn't just stick to, that moment. I start taking that on as like, oh my gosh, like, is this who I really am? And I'm doubting myself and who I've been called to be, versus now where I'm like, that doesn't mean I don't have any doubts or anything now, but I'm so secure where I'm like, that's not changing my identity. I know who I am. I'm sure of that. There's a certainty I have about myself now that I didn't have obviously first starting out. And that's come with maturity. That's come from experiences, that's come from doing this for as long as I have been. And so, yeah, I'm at a place now where I'm like, I'm content.
Nice. Before Cindy, before you get to your question, I just want to ask Portia, like in between making short films, how often are you writing when you're, not doing short films by the Bay Bridge?
with immaculate soundtrack music.
I
And
mean, that's
and amazing handsome co-stars.
shout out to my husband. Yeah, like where I'm at now, I'm writing almost daily, and that's great for me. Me and my husband talked about this often, where we wanted to get away from writing for other people. Like, okay, when I'm getting booked for a performance, when I have a gig, I'm writing. And I'm like, that's not the artist in me. Because then I start to feel like I'm a machine. I'm just pushing stuff out. You know what I'm saying? Like the love and the passion starts to get drowned out. So now I'm in a place where I'm like, I try to do free writes every morning. Like that's kind of been this new routine of mine where I'm like, let me get up, go walk the dog, and I'm gonna do a free write. You know what I'm saying? And that may turn into a more creative piece. And so I'm like, sometimes everything that I write doesn't have to go out and be something. Sometimes I could just write for myself, and I can look at that 5 years from now like, oh, this little journal entry was a little poem. You know what I'm saying? But there was a time where I was so, because I was like, I was excited. I'm being booked. I'm being booked. People are hitting me up, I'm doing stuff. I'm doing shows. And then it was just like, yo, I'm just kind of writing just to write. Like it doesn't feel like, oh, this is my passion. I love to do this, you know. So I had to get away from that. So where I'm at now, I write almost daily, but most of that is for myself. You know, it's not like, oh, this is gonna be a fire piece and I can do a visual with this and I can put it out. There's nothing wrong with that, but I had to get to a place where I'm like, let me just write just for the sake of writing, for my enjoyment and my own pleasure, so that I'm not getting lost in that cycle of, I'm just writing for other people. I'm just pushing stuff out so that, you know, I can get content out. You know what I'm saying? Like I don't want to just be like, oh, I just got to create something so I can post it on Instagram. Like that's whack to me. So yeah, I'm writing daily now.
Congratulations, Cineo. You got a question?
Nah, I was just gonna give a little commentary about the idea of how fickle people can be. Because who is anyone to try and enforce a choice to pick between one or the other, right? To to like who who in their right mind thinks that I have to choose because you tell me to choose? Whatever your choices are, they not my choices.
Right.
As I've said many times, people keep projecting, but one, I'm not a screen. That's not what I do. I don't sit up in a theater, and I'm not here for you to take your pictures and project them on me, right? Your fears, your doubts, your insecurities, your attachments, your history, that's yours. That's not mine. That's not for me to carry. That's not for me to hold on to. So it's like when you said that, right? Like what struck me was one, someone tells you, well, you can't have it both ways. You can have it however you want to have it.
Right.
That's first and foremost. That's between you and God. That's your relationship. That's not my relationship.
This
That's
when you
your
start talking like
relationship.
Denzel.
Oh man. Here we go. And then the next piece is coming into a space and transforming who you are versus coming into a space, being who you are and transforming the space. I think that's a pivotal thing for people to really pay attention to with what you said, right? Oftentimes we're asked to show up and we think that we need to fit the space instead of making the space fit us. That happens so many times in our jobs, that happens so many times in our families, that happens so many times in our relationships. When a person wants you, they want you because that's what they've come to know. That's what they've come to see. That's what they've come to be referred to. They've come for you. And then what do? Well, what do they want? They want you. And you realize that, right? You came into it and you said, no, I'm owning this. I'm not going to keep editing my words that you wanted, right? You want me in your space. So if I choose to talk about anything, it's me talking about it. And you asked me to be here. You invited me. You didn't invite the me that said, oh, we want the Adobe version of you. Yeah, we want Porsche, but we want the Twitter version. Could we get the Twitter version? Could we get the non-explicitive version, right? No. What you see is what you get. And oftentimes we come into spaces thinking we need to, oh, let's transform who we are instead of, oh no, I'm gonna transform the space that I'm in
Right.
because I'm a transformative being, right? I transform what's in front of me. I manifest and create destinies, right? So I think that it's important that people, when they listen, right, really take into the subtleties and the layers of what's being said. Because for me, when I heard that, I was like, it's absolute, right? You don't have to have fear in what it is that you bring into the table, especially if you have content with yourself. If you have love for yourself, respect for yourself,
Yeah.
then all you end up with, you're just going to share that love. You're going to share that respect. And sometimes that means unlocking or showing a harsh truth or showcasing pieces and parts of what we want to stay away or shun away from, but we can't. And so, I wanted to, give my piece on it, because when you said that, it hit me like, you're right. You do what you do.
Yeah.
Let it all fall where it's gonna fall. So that was me. That was it.
Appreciate you.
No, for
Yeah.
sure.
And Cindy, I agree with you that what her parents have have done in raising her and implementing certain things is very cunning, where you expose all of this art, right, which is basically geography, right, which is basically sociology, right, is basically saying, right, these are different walks of life and these are different perspectives, right, regardless of what they look like, but also including what they look like, right, which shapes, right, their content, which shapes, right, their culture as they tell stories, and say this is storytelling, right, through lyrics, through rhythm. And you can experience these stories even if you can't experience their lives or what some of the things that they're talking about. Even if we're going to, bring some, some barriers and limitations, to your experience as a youth, right, because of where you live, because of the history of where you live and where you grew up, you're able to see and learn of history, and like just being aware of the Angela Johnsons or the Asada Shakurs, and being aware of liberators and, liberation fighters, right, as well as Sly and the Family Stone or Tower of Power, um, local acts from the Bay Area who, you know, chose to tell their stories and give their experiences, while also saying this is our lives, and it doesn't necessarily have to be yours, or you may not ever experience some of these things, but we can tell this story, in our blackness, in our guitars, in our bands, and be authentic, and not be posing as something to fit into your radio and fit into your top 40. But we're going to tell our story, and because it's our story and it's authentic, it's going to be beautiful.
Definitely, definitely. So with that being said, Portia, how can people get connected, find your work? How can they interact with you?
Well, I always tell people to follow the Poetic Activist on Instagram. My friends always make fun of me because anywhere I'm at, I will literally tell people follow Poetic Activist on Instagram, so you can check me out there. You can find me on my what is happening right my website, thepoeticactivist.com. I got some content on there. I got some, if you want to check out my workshops, what workshops I provide, because I'm a workshoper too, I'm not just a poet. Check out my story. That's all on my website, thepoeticactivist.com. You can also check out my book, Two Kinds of Fire, coming up on 2 years since I published my first book, my first poetry book, Two Kinds of Fire. It's available on my website as well as Amazon. You can get it on Prime. So, yeah.
You can get 2 day shipping on the book. Two kinds of
Oh, see,
fire.
look, you got props too. Trying to say, you got props too. I see you out there. Now, Portia, you say been doing some things with lyrical opposition in the past. Are you still, working with lyrical opposition?
Say that again. You're breaking up.
Is it coming through now?
Is this better? No, hold on. Just the mask.
We
This the
we
mask.
lost we lost Portia because you put the mask on and disrupted the connection. We had 7G connection, and then you put the mask on and we got down to 2Gs. It happens sometimes. But if we can bring Portia back, we will. But for the most part, you know, the Poetic Activist, the website, the Instagram, Two Kinds of Fire is the book. It's on Amazon. Support local artists, support up and coming talent, support people who are here and established and that are about the life. And when I say about the life, I mean the life of a person who's actively engaged in the community to make it better, right? There ain't nothing wrong with wanting to see your people do good and be great. And so, Portia definitely illuminates and shines that light that is necessary and vital for all of us to be reminded and to also learn. There's, like, how many geniuses can you refer to? And it's always good when you can. And so if you're listening to this, now you can. Now you know where to go and how to get connected with a genius. Affluent, do you have any final thoughts or words for the people?
I really wanted to get Portia's take on some of the things going on currently, with policymakers and what's happening in Texas, what's happening in the school systems, what's happening in California. Uh, but hopefully you know we get her to come back on the podcast, and she blesses us with some wisdom and some perspective.
Definitely.
Uh,
Definitely. We're gonna have to run it back. I think we're gonna have to start hitting our sequels now. I think it's time. I think it's time to there's some conversations we had that got cut
yeah,
many
yeah, yeah.
times over. And I think we
True.
gotta start doing our part twos this go around because yeah, there's a lot that's happened. There's a lot that's going on, and it is good to get not only Portia's perspective, but all the previous, you know, people who we've interviewed to really get that insight, see where things have progressed, see how things have changed, and yeah, like have these conversations,
It's a different world than when we started the podcast.
ain't it?
It really is. We got 7 variants of COVID-19, even though it's COVID-19
It's 19, and they got 7 different ones.
from 2020 to 2021.
They just
You know,
preloading. They getting ready for the next 5 years or whatnot.
right? Say your flu shot now is gonna be one of 7. We go figure out which is the strongest variant, and we're gonna have you come for that flu shot, or along with your flu shot.
Just getting
Um,
inoculated.
but it's a wild world. You got you know servicemen and women, and service non-binary folks now, federal federal employees, federal staffers, now have to be lit up, and but mandatory lighting up has been something that's been part of the military, been part of the defense Department of Defense, for a long time. Um, and so, anyone complaining about that is just forgetting what they already been through, I think. And it's a good time to focus on community. It's a good time to really listen to, I think, the folks that we consider others, the ones who are not like us, um, as we move into this fall of 2021. It is a different world, and we are seeing things, right. We're just seeing things come to light, I think, that and come into the public eye and the public discussion that were not regularly talked about, that were not up for debate, that were not talked about behind the closed doors, of legislators and policymakers. And so, you know as subjects and demographics and the rights of the marginalized move from social media and corporate relevancy grabs, into this demographic matters and their rights matter, and they move out of the news cycle system. I think we'll see even more changes come, and it's really, again, like you said before the episode started, before we were live. It's a thing about centuries worth of education, and we have to do some teaching. And I say we, not just in the cultures that I subscribe to, but also, all of us. We all have to do some teaching, and sometimes we have to teach those who look most like us how to listen to those who don't look like us, or live like us at all.
Definitely. Couldn't have said it better myself. It's important for us to make sure not only that we're heard, but we're also understood. And hopefully we can get a sequel going so we can understand more from Portia. This has definitely been episode 66 of the Lyrical Ones podcast. And, as we often do at this particular time, I mean, we're not going to tell you throw your hands in the sky, but that's what he does when he meditates, when he's thinking. Every time he finds himself in a position that he can't get out of, he puts his hands like that. He's plotting his next move.
You're giving that English dub.
I just saw that episode. I just saw it. I'm like, timing, everything.
It's alignment. I really don't miss. One, 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 one.